Cool. Wow, we are live, right, and we're up and running. So all these things, right? I'm so excited. Not least because there's people from all parts of the planet and all musical inclinations, and a dear friend of mine is joining me on this call, and I think we're going to have a really cool time. Before we dive in to this session, that is for you guys, to be useful and to serve you a very unusual time in this planet's history. Before we dive into that, I just want to read something about my esteemed guest. So we met at the University of Leeds, and this is what it says here. So it says, while Bill was attending the University of Leeds, he majored in classical composition, and thanks to the college's open ethos, also managed to explore jazz, funk, and drum and bass in his final performance. Since then, he's honed the melodic immediacy of his approach, along with his intense improvisational prowess, forging a distinctive personal style that embraces English classical, electronica, and jazz rock sensibilities alongside gritty contemporary grooves. In the early noughties, a 20-something Lawrence was trying to make a living on the Leeds music scene when an unremarkable but timely pickup gig presented itself with a young bassist called Michael League in singer Michael Solomon Williams' band. Gigs in the up north of England forged a friendship with League, who happened to be looking for a new piano player, and League invited Lawrence to the US to record the first Snarky Puppy album, The Only Constant, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now, there's a long list of really cool places that you've played and cool people that you've played with, and I'm not going to read that bit out, but I am absolutely delighted to welcome multiple Grammy-winning improvisational, compositional phenomenon that is Bill Lawrence. How you doing, man?
It's quite an intro. Thanks, dude. Who wrote that? I don't think I've ever read that before. That's fascinating.
Must be true.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having us, and nice to meet you all present here. So many. It's so nice to see so many faces across the globe. Oh, Gigi's here. I know Gigi, and Alex. I know Alex and Chaz, my guys. Yeah, really nice to see you guys. And we've I've known Nick for a long time. Nick actually, we worked together when I was conducting the chamber orchestra at university.
God, yeah, that's right.
And Nick was working sort of behind the scenes for the orchestra and playing in the orchestra. And that's kind of where we first sort of worked together, right? And that was what, 20 years ago at least.
Good grief.
Thereabouts. Yeah. So, and then we had a chat sort of similar to this more recently, where we kind of dived into things. I guess that I mean, we can talk about music, obviously, but we've had some really interesting conversations over the years, and yeah, I'm happy to be having another one.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that looks really obvious to me, we've got a great group of people together on this call, and anybody that watches this on the live stream, on the playback, there'll be people who are experienced musicians, and there'll be people who are student musicians of some kind, whether they're an amateur or whether they're formally studying music. And one of the things that I've noticed, whatever stage people are at, is that we can compare ourselves to other musicians. So we put people on pedestals, and we idolize people, or because we think about the next step we want to get to in our development. It's kind of natural. And one of the things that we often miss, especially if we're idolizing these Grammy winner types, is the similarity between ourselves, between one another. And I think, part of the reason I'm so excited to be having this conversation, and it might make for a nice sort of jumping off point, particularly now, we called this thing how to stay inspired in lockdown. I don't know. Did you want to talk to us about a little bit about that transition um, from being a student at Leeds, like many other music students, to now being in a position of um, of status in the music industry, and how that's been, and sort of how you've got to that stage. What that's been like for you, I guess.
Mm, mm. Um, I mean, it's interesting, man. I suppose, as we all do, we just kind of we try and put our energy into the thing that we're inspired by, and that's really all I did. I remember when I left uni, I remember feeling quite distinctively that I was like losing my shackles, as it were, and I'd kind of been immersed in the classical world for so long, where I had to kind of be doing classical stuff. And once I kind of got the degree, I was like, oh, thank God for that. Now I can actually go and do whatever I want. And I suppose I made a point of, jumping into as many genres as possible. So I was played in a reggae band and a salsa group and um, you know, and still playing bits of classical, but then also lots of jazz. And I was just finding my feet really. But in terms of that trajectory, like I guess I was just having a go, and I never really had like very high expectations. I mean, I suppose for me, I do remember getting to the end of recording my third album that never got released, and I remember kind of pulling my hair out, like quite literally. Like I was so frustrated at the fact that I'd got to the end of making a third record and it still kind of wasn't good enough. And at that point, I remember having quite a sort of profound, like, is this real, like a sort of reality check where I was like, is this really for me? Can I really get away with like, the idea of being a professional musician and making a living out of this and all of that. And I had to kind of deal with that head on. And at that point I was kind of looking at getting like a more regular teaching thing and um, you know um, and then I guess I mean this was actually after I was still having these thoughts after I'd met Mike because Snarky Puppy were I met Michael League was it 2003 2004 and then he invited me to the States and I was going back and forth and we were touring unglamorously for 9 years.
Unglamorously, I like
uh,
it.
Sleeping on sofas and playing house parties. And
I think it's all pretty unglamorous, isn't it? From what I've heard from everyone I've ever spoken to, it's like
it's true. But I'd come back and I'd be 400 quid in the red, and like, but having had the time of my life just playing music with great players and sort of also seeing America for the first time. Like I was young, and I was just totally. I just wanted to travel and see the world, and so it was kind of the perfect opportunity. But we weren't really making any money per se. I mean, maybe just enough to kind of keep us going, but we certainly weren't saving anything. The majority we were losing. But even amongst all that, it was about like getting my own sound out there and getting, releasing something,
Mm.
all of that. And I still, after three records, hadn't achieved it. And I mean, Michael League, I always, he was in many ways, the guy I should be most thankful for, both in terms of, introducing me to Snarky Puppy, but also he helped produce my first record. And he kind of, I think he really sort of helped me just establish that first step of of a sound that was, I think, my voice, and something I talk about a lot in masterclasses is this idea of, you know, the significance of finding your voice, like
Mm.
what distinguishes your sound, and because when you hear any other musician you've heard of, as soon as they're playing, you know it's them. You know when you hear Herbie playing, you know it's him. When it's Miles or Stevie Wonder or Prince or whoever, as soon as it's there, as soon as you hear their sound, it's just instantaneous. And so, I've kept asking myself, well, what's the distinguishing thing,
Mm.
Um, and it's just sort of searching for that. And I feel like my, you know, meeting Mike was a huge sort of you know, luck of the draw for me, to meet somebody like that. At the same time, we were both kind of young and like looking for new ideas, and we just hit it off. And so, and he's still, you know, he was one of my best men at my wedding, and he's one of my best friends, and you know, we've kind of had a really amazing sort of relationship of just where we've grown together, and he's just opened loads of doors for me. So I kind of, you know, he was a big factor, in helping me realize these ideas. Um, but you know, I suppose now where Snarky Puppy has this kind of recognition, and it's opened doors for everyone in the band to then release their own records, and I feel like I've been able to find a voice, and find a sound that is unique to me. There, I do feel like, yeah, okay, I think I've ticked that box. Like you know, I'm kind of, there's a degree of satisfaction with that for sure, but I feel like the grass really never stops being greener. You know, you're always chasing, and I'm, if to be perfectly honest, I'm genuinely feel like I've literally only just scratched the surface of really what I want to do, and kind of, you know, where I want to go, and the music I want to make. You know, I feel like I'm just kind of just only
Mm.
open the door. You know, so I feel like that sense of that desire never really diminishes. Um, but you know, as far as that feeling of, you know, now I'm, because obviously when we won a Grammy, things definitely did change, and I have kind of mixed feelings about that, because I obviously it was amazing to get that recognition, and to go to the Grammys and walk the red carpet and meet all those people and yada yada. But like I you know, there's something. It's obviously completely subjective that you know, this panel, or the Grammy board ultimately kind of make the call. And from our point of view, I guess we were still just doing the same thing we've always done, and suddenly we get this recognition, and then suddenly that opens lots of doors.
Mm.
And I find it can often sort of cultivate a sense of like, oh, you need to get a Grammy, and then you've made it, you know, then you've done it, like, and it's sort of, that's so far removed from the music, like, and from what the music should be doing. And to kind of put any, I find, you know, putting music in any kind of competition is just, they're at, you know, they're kind of they're naturally opposed, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't, it's sort of, there's a lot about it that sort of doesn't agree with me. But obviously, I say that, and it completely changed my life. So I can't really hold it up like that. You know, I've got to just you know, be grateful, which I am. Um, but you know, then you start, then it becomes a bit of a gold mine. And you're like, you know, okay, now I want my own Grammy. You know, like I've got a Grammy with a different band, but now I want my own Grammy. I want 5 Grammys. You know, Grammy, Grammy,
Yeah.
Grammy.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, no. Just think about the music. Don't think about winning a Grammy. You know.
It's hearing you speak, I find it personally reassuring, and I'm sure that there's an element that you know, kind of, just joking aside, and like, you know, the human element of it, like what I'm hearing you describe is a kind of um, something that we can all relate to. That there's a kind of paradox that um, there's somewhere that you want to get to. You know, there's something. You know, we've all got, everyone listening has got a sense for what they can create, or, you know, how they'd like life to be at some level, even if it's like, I don't want it to be like this, and need it to be like something, even if it's as simple as that.
Mm.
And there's always this permanence, there's this permanent component of who you are, you know, like you said about finding your own voice. And I find it reassuring whenever I hear someone that has uh, you know, has achieved things that some people will never be able to say that they've achieved. And to know that the same kind of human experience that I have, even though I've not got, a collection of Grammys, or what have you, that kind of, I want to be over there, but I'm here. That's something that we can all relate to. And sometimes we sort of fall out of the grass is greener thing, and we're back here and we're just playing the piano or whatever we do, we're just being ourselves. And then we are able to sort of get lost in that grass is greener thing and be trying to be over there and trying to get somewhere.
Absolutely, man. I mean, that's a fascinating point because it makes me think about all the people who I've met who are my idols, that I've met, I guess, in the last maybe sort of 5 to 10 years, and like the reoccurring theme, like so, I mean, Herbie Hancock is my number one, right? And like he's the guy. If there is a guy, it's Herbie, and I met him, and it was just glorious. Like he was so easy to talk to, and in a way that alone was the most inspiring part of the whole meet. Just to feel like you're saying, he's just another guy ultimately who is really talented and worked really hard, but like is just another human being, and just to kind of bring these sort of these people kind of down to earth is that what to me was actually the most inspiring thing. And to realize actually, I've always put these people up in this
Yeah, yeah.
this unattainable space, but actually they're just people who are talented, but they just kind of they just worked really hard, And then I met Chick Corea at the Tokyo Blue Note Festival, and we had a chat after his show, and we just talked about practicing, and like he was just saying, I've practiced like in 3 weeks for this thing. I've been really practicing like every day, like, and kind of leveling with me, like we were just, and I was just like, it just
I've done
felt
my
like,
best, honest.
yeah, yeah, I mean, like I hate name dropping, but like,
Oh, go on.
well, no, just like whenever you meet these people of this kind of caliber, like they all have this thing in common of just. In fact, John McLaughlin said it the best, who I actually only met a couple of months ago in Montreux for an education thing we were doing, and he was like, I said, of all these badass guys and girls that you've played with, like, is there anything they all have in common? Like, because he's played with Miles,
That's a great question.
right, and he's played with Ravi Shankar, he did a tour with Ravi
Uh-huh.
Shankar. He's like, he's gone to each end of the spectrum in terms of technical ability of the instrument, and he said, yeah, they do have something in common, and it's that they're all cool. And what he meant by cool is like they're not difficult to. They didn't have anything to prove, basically.
Mm.
I suppose it's kind of a contradiction because obviously they're in a position to feel like that because they have been recognized, right? But like, I don't know, it just was an interesting thought that stuck with me where, these people who have achieved this stuff, they just have, I suppose they have an innate confidence, but they're ultimately they're kind of just they're content in their own space, and they're sure about what it is they're trying to say. I think is another thing, and so maybe the goal is just like working that out, like what is it you really want to say, and kind of thinking about that, and really, and then deciding, and then kind of sticking to that, or just, I mean, maybe it's just a degree of conviction, but and I don't know, you just hang out with these guys, and they all have. I mean, Stevie Wonder's another one. Like, I only met him for 5 minutes, but like I got a tiny window to chat with him, and it's like, and sorry, I feel like an idiot, man, but Quincy Jones, these people, they're just, if they were in this room right now and just be, it would be a hang, it would be so easy, and there's just no sense of ego, basically,
Mm.
and that was just more inspiring than anything, to just feel like I could hang out with these people and not feel like an idiot, I guess, or not feel like I was just they're just somehow kind of this alien person, and they're just human beings.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm listening to you, and I can imagine that you could hear that a couple of ways. You could hear that you know, despite the fact that they are these titans, despite the fact they have this status, that there's an element of being the same. And another way of hearing it maybe is like that's a really average, everyday kind of divinity, like a divine quality that we've just all got access to. Like it's just in the same way, I heard you say like, but they're just easy to hang out with. I was thinking like, whenever I've taught really young children, I know they're loud and they don't know how to like control themselves and stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of their spirit, or in terms of like where they're coming from, it's like they're not trying to prove anything.
Yeah.
You've got a 1-year-old, haven't you? So maybe you're not seeing the easygoing side of things at the moment.
Dude, that's such a good compare. I mean, that is really what it's like, man. When you're hanging out with somebody who's just so comfortable in their own skin, and like Crosby's another one. Like, you know, and it's like you just kind of it's the kind of person you wanna hang out with because they're just so basically they're just happy. They're
Mm,
content, and they don't have anything really to prove, and they're open and they're amazing, incredible listeners. Such so good at just waiting their turn and then just you know and then responding. I think that's another massive thing for me is just you know one's ability to listen. Like I remember Quincy telling me, there's a reason we've got you know two ears and one mouth, right? Because you need to listen twice as much as you need to talk.
were
Um,
you talking at the time?
I think it might have been. Uh, uh, um, but yeah, it's like what and it's true, man. I've got Jesse, my little 1-year-old, and I look at him, and it's just like there's so. I mean, it's such a cliche, but there's so much. This whole like you put music on, and he's like his hips are just going, and like he's like, what the hell is this? Like, this is amazing, like and it's just the inhibition, the inhibition, and we all lose it when we get older, and it's just such a shame. And it's like I think almost it's like trying to you know I mean as musicians, artists, it's the job is to be a conduit to an emotion, right? Or be a vessel to kind of express an emotion. And so the kind of being a good musician or good artist is about having a really sort of clear flow of from instinct to conception or whatever, right?
Mm,
So
mm.
and kind of breaking the blockage when you get inside your head, or you doubt yourself, or you think you haven't done well enough, or you're putting too much pressure on yourself, or whatever it is. And there's all these blockages, and actually the goal is to just keep this streamlined sort of childlike instinct, you know and it's it's really hard to maintain as when you get older and you've got bills to pay and life to live and all the rest. But like I don't know. I find now like Jesse is teaching me more than my first piano teacher ever did. Actually, that's a lie. My first piano teacher was amazing. My second piano teacher, yeah.
I've got a sense for what you mean, but can you expand on what you mean by Jesse teaching you more than your piano teacher?
He's just unadulterated inhibition. You know,
Mm,
and that's really the goal. As when we're writing, when we're improvising, when we're dancing, when we're just talking. Like just being free with your thoughts and free with your ideas. And another interesting thing. What's his name? John Patitucci, Chick Corea's bass player, said on
mm,
class a few weeks ago that he apparently Miles and Chick would sorry Wayne Shorter and Chick Corea would tell him because they were his kind of he was working with both of them for
Mm.
years, and they would say like just lose your inner critic when you're writing. Just get rid of your inner critic. It's not helpful. It only blocks your ideas. So you know, when you're writing, every idea is right. Just roll with it. Just go with instinct. You know, we can come back and talk about it. We can come back and evaluate and pick it
Mm.
apart. But like for the first instance, just lose the inner critic, because that's, you know, that's what's going to just kind of stop any chance of there being a free flow. You know, and yeah, that's what Jesse, my little 1-year-old, has in spades. Like he's all instinct, and it's he's even started going like when you smile at him, he goes ooh, like that, and I've never done that, you know. Ooh, like he's being shy, you know. Ooh. And it's like, where's he got that from, you know? And I think he said there's no images of it, or you know, I mean, I don't know, not even in storybooks. Uh, and it's like I just feel like that's instinct. He's just kind of there's some things that he's just done instinctively, and it's kind of fascinating, kind of identifying what those things are and why. You know?
Mm. Mm. No, it's really interesting. It's really interesting to sort of, you know, I'm kind of listening, you know, as someone who knows you, and sort of I think I'm on the same page as you, and I know that my experience as a music student of probably, I don't know, when I was a teenager, for example, the way I thought musicians worked and the way I thought people worked was so different, you know. And to me, those two perspectives, like how I used to see people as like people being individuals and being separate, and being some people being special and having it, and other people not being special and not having it, or needing to improve themselves in some way.
Right,
and
right.
and and the thing, you know, hearing you talk, the thing that is touching me, I guess, is the fact that there, you know, I'm hearing you say that there's this innate, um there's this innate place in us, there's this innate part of us that um is instinctive, is a deep place within us where ideas and thoughts and feelings come from. And when you're a child, you haven't got all the stories that are telling you that you can't think a certain thought, or can't move a certain way, or can't, you know. And
Yeah,
then as we go through life, we end up accumulating rules that either someone's given to us, or that we've kind of concluded or deduced for ourselves. And then we go, okay, well, I'm gonna speak with my own voice, but not the dark bits I'm not allowed to do, and not this bit I'm not allowed to be, and I'm meant to be a bit like that guy, so I'm going to try and, you know, and by the time you're, you know, I don't know, 20s or 30s, you've got this self concept, which is, this is who I definitely am, this is who I definitely am not.
right.
And it's so easy to forget that, you know, that childlike place has actually got, you know, what Jung would call the shadow involved in it. It's got all the nastiness. It's got our rage. It's got our shame. It's got our embarrassment. It's got our sort of self-doubt included in it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot to be said for, you know, in the process. And I've been fascinated to know, you know, how you think about this. Like in the process, to me, of finding your own voice is learning about the dark side of yourself. What is learning about the, like, being able to tap in directly to
Mm.
the thoughts and feelings as they actually are, not how we kind of want them to be. It's like, well, what's the urge I'm getting?
Mm.
Now, am I getting the urge to go with a post bop thing, or am I getting the urge to be classical? Or what am I actually feeling the vibe of, rather than, well, what's hip at the moment? What should I be doing? What's the music college telling me I should be? You know, what's selling at the moment? It's like, what does my heart tell me?
Totally, and that is one of the hardest things to balance, I think, and I really struggle with it, and is part of why it took me so long to kind of find my voice, because there were I made 3 records before I made Flint, which was the first record that got released, and 2 of those records were actually quite sort of commercially driven. You know, I was like, I thought, because I did a jazz record, and then I was like, okay, I'll do a pop. It was great, but my friends said it sounded jazzy, and I just couldn't hack that. I was like, I don't want to make a jazzy record. I want to make a record, and I was really interested in songs. So I was like, I'm gonna write songs. I'm gonna be a singer, and so I did a record with me singing, and it was terrible because I'm not a singer. But I had to go through that process. I
Mm-hmm.
had to realize, and then I was like, okay, well, if not, I'm not the singer, then I just need to find a singer. So then I found a singer, and we did a whole, we did a record as well, a couple of records, and it sounded great, but it was being driven more by kind of trying to fit a mold in a way than just kind of giving in to one's instinct more. And I think there's for me the sort of the thing that has to be there is sincerity. And I just didn't really feel like the albums I'd done before were really that sincere, and because that's ultimately what an audience is going to be able to access is 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 honesty, is
Mm.
an artist kind of genuinely being themselves, and so therefore, how do you find your voice? You've got to find yourself,
Yeah.
and you've just got to be honest with yourself about what it is you're looking for, and then okay, okay, I'll do that. So I feel like playing this chord with this groove, and that's how I feel right now. And then maybe a week later you'll go, oh, I'm not so sure about that anymore, and that's all okay as well. But that's also very relevant and very much part of the process, like coming back to the idea, and kind of regurgitating it. And yeah, if an idea, as I said with the writing, every when you're writing, every idea is correct. Just let it go. Like lose your inner critic. Um, that does mean if you have a bad idea, that's okay because it might also later lead to a good idea. Like, this, as I say, like my first record, Flint, I couldn't have arrived there without these other three records that were in their own ways flawed in some respect.
Mm-hmm.
And that was absolutely part of the vital process. You have to kind of have this stepping stone thing going on. And I always say writing is writing, or writing is rewriting, I should say. You know, and like I always talk about HBO script writers who they've got 20 people doing that, and they're all beavering away all the way up until they shoot the scene, and so they're constantly rewriting it. They're constantly redrafting, reshaping. If the idea doesn't come straight away, that's okay. That's part of the deal, and the goal, the process, the job is to come back to the idea and sculpt it again until it's like Crosby says, I sculpt these songs until they look like diamonds,
Mm.
and I and then I let them go. Um, but I can't remember what your original question was. um, but just yeah, like how do you find your voice? It's sincerity for me, and it's got to be honest, and you can hear it. You can straight away you can hear if somebody's making or writing or recording something that is being done with a sense of I'm doing this because I think people might like it,
Mm-hmm.
versus I'm doing this because this is who I am, and you can take it or leave it, and even if I don't like the music or the art, I will appreciate that intention way more.
Mm.
And I think the audience in general will, instinctively.
Yeah, because they can. The thing is that they can relate to that kind of experience. What I'm hearing you say is that I'm particularly thinking about the title of the of this conversation, and thinking about how do we stay inspired in lockdown, and what the dots that I'm joining up is that actually, you know, whether we're in lockdown or not, there's always this kind of in it, out of it, kind of more self-conscious, less self-conscious. There's always this kind of, you've got to be, there's got to be a kind of acceptance of the process. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying that there aren't, you know, logistical challenges to the way that the world is at the moment. Of course there are, and that our experience has unpleasant moments by its nature. You know, it has, you know, we can be intensely judgmental, you know, and what I see particularly, you know, the sort of clients that I work with, sometimes they can kind of get derailed because they're part way through the process and they think the experience is meant to be pleasant all the time, or they're meant to feel inspired every single moment of the journey.
Totally,
And
totally.
they're not that necessarily, that they're kind of having a misunderstanding about how their feelings are meant to be. Their feelings are meant to be whatever they're meant to be in the moment.
Absolutely, man. And that's a real kicker in the sense of the you know, managing one's expectation, but also just staying, like we've talked about meditation before, right?
Hmm.
And how you can kind of the techniques you can establish to manage these things. And you know, I'm a real supporter of meditation. I find my meditation is often in my music, and I like there are only so many hours a day where I have to myself. And you know, if I've got 1 hour, I'm probably going to use it to play some piano rather than like sit in silence. But I totally recognize the sort of the potential power in meditation, or the sort of, you know, the philosophy behind mindfulness and different sort of different strands of Buddhism, I guess, and that whole kind of philosophy that I'm really interested in, particularly in terms of the idea of acceptance, right? And like you're saying, just kind of, you know, I think it's so important that we don't push away the negative energy, like, or we don't put it under a carpet. You know, we don't sort of try and kind of, you know, pretend it's not there. We like the whole thing is, it's got to be open. You've got to be accepting. You've got to sort of really just let whatever is going to happen. And you know, I think the potential power of, if you know, if you become the Dalai Lama, or whoever it is, like, to me that's a superhero. You know, like, if you can sort of train your mind to be able to kind of, because like that's I suppose an idea of enlightenment, right? This, you know, where you kind of you are so accepting, where there's anything could be thrown at you in life, and you are still able to kind of, you know, not basically be accepting of it. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't claim to be any kind of scholar on any of this stuff, but you know, I've only kind of dived in a little bit. But I you know, I find the whole sort of premise and kind of aspiration to be so inspiring, and kind of like with giving you a sort of potential invincibility, you know, where, and so there are days where you know, anyone is going to have a bad day, or you know, maybe you didn't get the call, or the composition didn't come out the way you wanted it to, or whatever it is. And so yeah, we have to be well versed as human beings in kind of managing those days, and not just saying, it wasn't a bad day, I'm going to kind of deny, like being in denial about them.
Mm, mm,
I think that's actually where you start getting more problems. And so it's about really just kind of opening up to it and saying, okay, you know. And it's the same with relationships, right? You know, when you get in a bad, you know, a tricky situation, like, and then the instinct is to kind of close up, right? The instinct is to defend yourself, and to kind of, and to be closed. And that's actually completely the opposite of what the situation requires, which is to be open, and to be undefensive, non-defensive, and to be accepting, you know. I mean, I keep coming back to the whole the kind of the aspiration of mindfulness,
Mm.
because it's like, if you really dedicate yourself to it, I feel like it's the answer to everything. If all else fails and you really do get kind of lost, like I think if you can really get down with that stuff, and genuinely are capable of accepting anything that life throws at you. I mean, just imagine that, like that, you know, it's such a kind of unimaginable thought to, you know, if all the worst things that could possibly happen to you happened in one go, you know, and yet, and then your mind was such that you were able to just kind of turn around and go, okay, so, you know, how do I what can I do now, you know? Like, to me, that's being invincible, and that's an aspiration I try and hold, actually, kind of front and center of every exchange that I have with people and with music and
Mm.
art, and that's my kind of driving force, I guess. And you know, by no means have I come anywhere close to kind of mastering it, but I feel there are times when I glimpse it, and I'm like, there might be a time where I'm like, oh, that's okay, that's bad news.
Mm.
That's tough. I'm gonna need a minute here, you know, and then, you know, I'll kind of like sort of ingest it like Neo at the end of the Matrix shot, you know, and you just go, and then, okay, all right. So how can we move on from this? You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I'm so glad that we're talking about this, and because it's a real conversation about something that I too feel is I'm not going to say that it's important, because it's, you know, anyone on this call is, you know, is free to do what they wish and explore what they wish, and you know, make the choices that they make, and I would say that you know, certainly what you said, the way it looks to me is that, you know, we've along the journey as human beings, there's this kind of conscious set of stories and beliefs and feelings and thoughts and stuff of our life, and then there's this stuff that's out of awareness, apparently, you know, like we could call it the subconscious mind, or you could call it you know, beyond the personal thinking, whatever. And you know, you know, the me of sort of 20 years ago would have heard what you said there and thought, okay, well, I can consciously figure out the areas of my life where I'm not seeing it, or where I'm taking it really personally, and it just doesn't look like that to me now. It just seems that, like, everybody has their own blind spots, like you just can't tickle yourself, you know. It's like there are places where, I talk about it with a coach myself, and this is the kind of conversation that I have with musicians, is that, you know, we need, it's useful to have some way of looking within. Fundamentally, forget music, you know, fundamentally, it's whether you call that meditation, or whether you call it self-inquiry, or some people do it through some kind of religious practice, or they kind of have figured it out themselves, that there's a kind of looking into the self, or there's looking out into the world of stuff. But, like, really looking within, maybe with someone's help, and really noticing that, actually, you know what, I've got real hang-ups about money, and I'm really ashamed that I'm even asking certain questions about money, or I'm really embarrassed that I don't know all my key signatures and I'm a professional musician. You know, all sorts of stuff comes up in conversations. It's like, and it's the bit that we're ashamed of, and it's the bit that we disown about ourselves, you know. And I used to really run away from that stuff, like, at any cost. And I've learned more and more and more that, actually, if you can turn around and almost like run towards that and get curious about, like, why does that feel like a trigger to me? Why does that? And it's like, I can have that feeling of intense shame, or like in a man's case, like not feeling manly enough or whatever it is that really pushes your buttons. And I'm not going to sort of go through all of them, but like to really be able to look at that stuff, feel it and breathe into it, and like actually really be with that darker side of myself.
Exactly.
That's like you said about a superhero. It's like that's why you don't get phased by playing a wrong note over a D7 sharp 9 chord. It's like, well, that's how Miles managed to sort of style it out so that it worked. It's because it's not even anything to accept. It's just I'm allowed to feel. I'm allowed to be just as I am right now, and there's such power in that kind of bigger self rather than the kind of story I've made for myself.
Absolutely.
And you feel that in someone's music or their presence or the way they, like you said, the way they hang with you or the way they teach you or the way they are as a parent or whatever it is. This is why I'm so passionate about this stuff, is because it just feels like whether you're a musician or not, like it makes the world a better place for people who have done that looking within and they know who they are and they found their voice, whether it's in music or whether it's as a human being, they speak with integrity, like wholeness. They know who they are.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And you have to look at that stuff like head on. You have to, like you said, you have to kind of engage with that, with those kind of demons of yourself that where you the monkey on your shoulder.
Yeah, yeah,
What about that? What about that? And all your life you're just like, wait, what is that? I just can't. No, 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 no. Like, okay, so what is this? Like, what's the let's talk. Let's talk. Let's go. Let's deal with this.
yeah,
Let's face this. And you can just spot the people who have done that. Like, or who are just they're just they've come to terms with themselves, I suppose, and they're like, okay, I've tried that, but at least I've tried, and we've had the conversation. As long as
yeah,
conversation, it's when there's no conversation, it's when there's blockage, it's when there's no, then that's when everything starts. That's when you lose the flow or whatever. And this idea of flow or whatever, you kind of hear about it again and again in martial arts or in like music and improvisation or Alexander technique. I'm really interested in that, which kind of got, because I got problems in my wrists, man, when I was playing for dance classes, and I would just hammer away, and then I really injured myself, and I tried various different things to get out of it, and then Alexander technique. If anyone ever has problems like with playing, the get out of jail situation is Alexander technique, and it's so brilliant because it was like an actor who lost his voice and he had to develop a technique so that he didn't lose his voice anymore.
yes,
The whole sort of premise is just a lack of tension. It's just let the neck be free. That's the let the neck be free. Let the neck be free. And there's just this, because when I was playing, my shoulders would come up, and there was all this tension here, just tension, and then it caused pain, and it's just like, it's such a kind of, you can draw, you can make analogies for that until the end of time about tension, or like tension being the beginning of some kind of disruption. When things are tense, things go wrong. When things are free and open and flowing, things go well.
well, then this is it. I came to the work that I do via the Alexander technique, and more and more I've seen that there's so many similarities about like when you spot, for example, physicality aside, when you spot that there's a kind of emotional tension, like I think I should be that guy but I'm actually me, oh I feel sad, there's that kind of like I should be over there. There's a kind of, people they physically hold on when they realize those feelings. And when I'm speaking to people in coaching sessions, it's like they hold their breath because they don't want to, they're doing anything they can physically to stop themselves thinking the thought or having the feeling. And then they find that when they breathe whilst having that supposedly impossible thought or impossible feeling, they can handle it. They actually are. They're already a superhero. They're already enlightened. They just thought they weren't.
Right,
You know,
right.
they have this depth to them and this kind of dependability in their very being that is enough. That's genuinely enough. You know, they might not have acquired some status sort of in the industry or whatever, but their being is enough. And that's
Hmm.
a very solid place to be a student or to be anything, you know. I'm
Absolutely.
so glad you mentioned it because it's, you know, I love the fact that the Alexander technique is about like undoing and finding balance and
Right.
finding the interplay rather than trying to have the right kind of posture or like in the mental side of things, like trying to have the right kind of thoughts.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. Yeah, lack of tension, man. Lack of tension. And yeah, that idea that it is still it like that enlightenment is actually attainable like to anybody like right now. Like, you know, you could just like, you know, just have a moment where just going, okay, I feel at peace in myself, you know. That's like quite you know, if you like genuinely sit in that for a moment, it's like that's kind of powerful, man. If you
Yeah.
really believe it, and that's like wow. And you know, and if you do really believe it, then it's like I want to hear what you've got to say. I want to hear what you've got to play. You know, I want to hear you make
Yeah.
music. You know, um, and like these guys like Herbie, is another, you know, he's like a he does chanting before he you know a devout. I don't know what strand of Buddhism it is that he practices, but it's with chanting and he does it before he goes on stage to really kind of ground himself, and he's like he's on you know I think he represents some Buddhist I don't know section or
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever it is, and he's very active in that realm and
It surprises me that it's not more wide. I mean, it's reasonably well known among musicians, but it surprises me that that kind of, you know, whatever you whether you call it Buddhism or whether there's you know, we're talking about also you know, Taoism or Advaita Vedanta. Like there's so many traditions that kind of overlap in
sure.
you know, like what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy. It's like there's just that there is this deeper sense of being, and then there's the character with all the story. You know, there's that kind of paradox. I'm surprised. Well, I suppose this is why we're even having this conversation, because I want musicians to be looking in this direction and to be curious about how excellence and well-being and falling out of your ego, like falling out of your sense of limited self, how that can really benefit a life. And sometimes music is affected by that, and sometimes it isn't. But it makes a life better. It makes people. It makes the world a better place, as far as I can tell.
Yeah,
For no
yeah.
other reason, you know, not because the world needs fixing, because it doesn't need fixing. It's fine as it is.
I think
But just, you know,
no, no. Go on. Sorry.
no, I was just, you know, because there's a curiosity. Like I was drawn to explore this stuff, and that's enough for me to kind of go, okay, well, like you said, I'm gonna sort my shit out. I'm gonna look at who I am,
Yeah,
and that has, in my case, I've felt like it served my music in my humble way of making music. That's served me, you know.
yes, yes. Totally, man. That's just made me think of, you know, I think a recent shift in my perception of what I'm doing. Like for so many years, it was just about, okay, I'm just making music because I want to make some good music. That was as far as it went, you know, because I'd heard some good music and it made me feel good, and I was like, I want to do that, you know, and why? Because it's cool. It's music's cool, like you know, but now I feel like I appreciate its sort of power more and its kind of wider impact about you know being uh, I don't know just like I mean Stevie said it to me you know I said I'm Stevie I'm a young aspiring musician Stevie Wonder hi
As you
you
do.
you got no idea who I am you know, I'm just looking for a pearl of wisdom, just a pearl of wisdom, and just what have you got? And anything, and just speak. You could just talk. It's fine. And he said, he grabbed my hand, squeezed my hand, and she said, "We are the glue of society, and it's our role and responsibility to bring love and unity to the planet." And ever since then, I've just been like, okay, so I mean, I've always been aware of the power of music, and like, it's the fact that it's the one universal language. You can go to the middle of the Amazon and not speak, the same language as somebody you might meet there, but be able to go, and boom, and you're off. And like, music is just, it transcends. It's the ultimate
Yeah.
way we can all communicate. And John McLaughlin said it too. He was like, the thing I love the best about music is that you can go halfway across the world having not met this person, and then you play music, and suddenly you're in a family. It's like you basically have this family. You're related to all these people all over the world, all these other musicians. Like,
Mm.
being a musician is this. It's, because we all speak that same language, so we're instantly connected. And it's sort of, I mean, it kind of sounds obvious to say it, but like it stuck with me, and I was like, man, and so the real, the sort of beauty and majesty of and power that music has to kind of really, um, both kind of, be the glue, but also, you know just kind of help the world, and I don't know, just like, ultimately, to be a good musician is to be in touch with your emotions, basically.
Mm.
So
Mm.
being a good musician isn't like going, you know, it's actually like knowing who you are and being able to access that part of yourself. I mean, obviously, you need technique and you need theory, and
Yeah.
that is all about
But the
practice.
place that comes from is deeper. Yeah.
Exactly. And we kind of forget about that stuff. And like, as I say, man, all these sort of idols of mine that I've met, like, they definitely all have this in common. They're all just so, um, they have these attributes in spades.
Mm. Beautiful. I'm loving this conversation. I could ask you questions all evening, and I've noticed that there are many other fine people here who want to ask you questions. I'm going to go to Giselle. Um, if you want to unmute yourself, Giselle. I can't find you.
Hi. Hi,
Hi,
I'm
Giselle.
over here.
Hi.
Hi. It's been a long time since I've been on this group, on the Just Play group for a long time. But again, this is so fucking amazing. I don't know if I could swear, but
You just did, and
uh,
you can. You're welcome to do it again.
yeah.
We're all about
So
feeling feelings here.
I do have a question because you guys were talking about the Alexander technique, and, and it's the conflict between technique versus being able to play within your heart. So I was wondering if there was ever a balance where you have to switch from thinking about your technique when you're doing your own performances versus uh, getting lost in the music, or at least
Mm.
not thinking about the technique when you're on stage.
Yes, yes, totally. That's a great question. I mean, there's a book that I've just read. I mean, I have been aware of for ages, but I've only just started diving into it. The trio I play with, Marius Alexa, this amazing drummer, and Jonathan Harvey, an incredible bass player. They both are really into this book. And you may have heard of it. It's called Effortless Mastery by Kenny Werner, who is an amazing pianist, and he talks about this kind of having it being a really important distinction of what you're talking about, whereby there is a place where you practice and you work on your technique, and you think about your technique and you focus on your technique, and that is very much specifically for the practice room, and it should kind of, he's quite adamant that there should be a very firm line underneath that. And so, you use the practice room and the practice time to improve your technique, and it should be like a kind of, microscopic sort of process where you're like literally, you know it's almost like you're going to the gym. That's kind of the sort of approach, so that we kind of drill down on. So we're not thinking about harmony, we're not thinking about rhythm. Well, you could say rhythmic technique, but like, you know, it's very focused on just that. And then when it comes, see, we draw a line under that, and then when it comes to being on stage, and when there's an audience, and when it's the red light is go and off, you know, and we're on, all that stuff, all that consideration, all those kind of thoughts and questions should be out of the equation. And now the whole idea, the whole purpose, the whole focus, the whole point is that we get lost in the music. Like we like that's really, I feel like I haven't had, I don't like, I feel like I haven't had a good gig unless I get completely lost. And kind of get completely like immersed in the moment specifically. So like, you know, obviously the music I play, there's a lot of improvisation, and there's a big emphasis on that. And I feel like I have to play something that I didn't know I was going to play, like on stage. I have to kind of, as much as I can, surprise myself, so that it will be genuine. You know, it will feel like a real moment, as opposed to just pulling out the licks that I've practiced in the practice room. I mean, you know, that's why you do the technique stuff, so that you can then be free, right? And have the flow. You know, so we work hard in the gym so that we can run, you know, 10Ks or whatever it is, but run and play with total freedom. And you know, that's a golden chalice up there, and I don't claim to have sort of reached that kind of freedom. I think, you know, I'm sort of, I'm I'm growing all the time. But I mean, even Herbie Hancock would say, like, you know, oh man, I've still got so much work to do, like, you know. And that was another really sort of grounding thing of like, all these people, you just assume they must just think, you know, I can do anything. And actually they are, you know, that's the beauty of the art. You know, you never stop searching. But I think that distinction is really important, so that each area gets its due value. You know, like so when you're practicing, that's what you're doing, and when it's technique, that's what you're working on, and then when you're performing, that's what you're doing. You're performing. You're being in the moment. You are expressing yourself freely for an audience to enjoy. You know, like that's there should be that distinction, I think.
There's also an overlap with what we've been saying, isn't there? You know, about like when you're in the practice room and your job is to, you know, you're kind of allowed to do that judgment, and you're allowed to do that kind of reflection. That negative thinking, negative feelings can come up in the process of that bit. You know, like it can be ugly in the practice room. I think that's something that's not immediately obvious to people sometimes. That actually, you know, and we had a call with Kenny a while ago, and you know, talking about that actually part of that practice process is, you know, being with whatever's required in the practice room and going into depth. So if you know, if my, I don't know, 251s are not really that strong and nailed, then you give yourself permission to be able to go into depth until you've rinsed it out, until you've done you've paid your dues, because there's no ego to kind of placate and go, oh well, I should know this, so therefore I don't need to do the work. It's like, I don't know this, I can't do this thing, so I give myself permission to do simple things, you know, go into the depth of it.
Yeah, and I guess that's it. That's it. And I guess it's like meditation in the sense that, you know, when you start, I remember my first few sessions I really enjoyed, and then I started realizing it was kind of lifting up like the carpet from what I was like, oh man, there's some kind of, like, you know,
Can worms everywhere.
I don't want to go down there. And you know, like, so when you start practicing, you can start sort of almost like identifying more clearly like what you're struggling with, you know.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, part of the process. Again, it's like that's part of So then it's okay. Well, that's good that you've identified it. So why are you struggling with it? And what is it that you're not doing that you feel like you should be? Be able to articulate that, and then address it head on.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Chaz in the comments says practice makes paranoid. I think
Right,
that sums
right,
up very nicely what we're saying. I'm going to go to another question. I know that there's lots of people with questions to ask. Got Diego next. Unmute yourself, Diego. Hey,
Can you hear me well?
absolutely.
How's it going?
Awesome. Sending lots of love and respect from Panama.
Oh,
From
wow.
the Danilo Perez Foundation, actually. I don't know if you're familiar.
What's that?
Here from the Danilo Perez Foundation. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah. Totally. Wicked. Dude, if
Yeah.
you,
So that actually, there's a couple of students here that are part of the foundation in here on the call.
oh wow. Oh, cool, man. Yo, if you ever
Yeah, it's
if
really
you ever
cool.
want some dinner jazz in a restaurant or something, just say the word. I'm there, man. Kind of bang.
That's the plan. Yeah. So I'm working on that, trying to bring a couple artists over here because I was actually the international coordinator for the festival this year. So for sure, we can talk about that. Absolutely.
All right. Wow. Man, seriously.
So my question for you is recently I've finally gotten to a place where because when you're starting out or either you're coming out of university or college or wherever it may be, there's this tendency to always question what you're creating in terms of the theory. So does this work based on the theory, not does this work because it sounds good or does it feel good? And I think when you get to a place where you just start trusting your ear and you start trusting that this library of sounds and emotions that you have in your catalog work and you know how to make them work and it sounds good, then it probably is good. So I'm curious to know your experience in your trajectory, which I've been following and I really, really admire. How has your process of, I guess, trusting yourself and trusting your ear developed over time? And then really, really quickly, there's a tune in the first Snarky album, the third song called Precipice. And I've tried to find what the meter is because it feels like it's shifting all the time. Is the meter shifting?
Is the meter shifting?
In Precipice. Yeah, it's the third tune on the first Snarky album.
Yeah, I think it is, man. I think it is. I'm pretty sure
Because I
it's.
can't find one, man, for the life of me. I can't find one.
One,
Yeah, that's the one.
2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it goes to 7, man. I'd need to listen to it, but
The but then it's like it never has a one again.
No. It stays in 5. This is classic Mike.
Yeah.
It's classic. Like, what about me is another example where everyone's like,
Yeah, it stays in four.
what's the time signature? And it's just 4/4 the whole way. And he just kind of plays across the bar line. He writes across the bar lines. So
Okay.
it makes you feel like really confused. I'm pretty sure it's all 5. It stays in 5 the whole way. Um, so there's no swapping a meter, but where you feel the phrase then shifts within the bar, obviously. But
Yes, I got the answer. Awesome.
I think that's right. I mean, you should ask the composer really. But and so yeah, and then wait, what was your first question?
My first question was I just had to get that off my chest because I met Mike a couple of times before and I completely forgot to ask him that. So this is my chance. Who better than the pianist who played on that record? So my first question was just over time, how has your process of developing, I guess, more self-trust or trusting your ear and not really basing your ideas off of does this work theoretically, but does it sound good? And do I know that it sounds good? Maybe it's not theoretically exactly the way that I was taught, but if it sounds good, it probably does work.
Totally. And I think it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about this sort of, this journey of establishing enough faith in your own idea to just follow your instinct and be sincere about it. I think, and that is something that has taken a long time for me and the band actually. Like, I think, early on in Snarky Puppy, you know, the guys, or we would all write stuff that had very clever stuff going on. Like there'd be clever meters, or there'd be like pretty, you know, challenging harmonies happening. And then as sort of the years went by, we would more and more just kind of follow instinct, and we would almost collectively know when something felt good. And I think that you've hit on a really like such an incredibly important part of what it is we need to do is trust ourselves when it does feel good, you know. And like, I mean, Quincy said it best. He's like, if it moves you, then it's probably going to move someone else too. And you like, this is really our job as musicians, artists, is knowing whether or not it's moving. You know, and sure, and that, you know, and ultimately it's subjective. One person's thought of something that's moving is someone else's thought of something that is not going to be moving at all. And so who's to say, you know, I like, maybe there's, you know, I'm sure there's millions and millions of people in the world who absolutely hate listening to my music, right? But then, you know, there's enough people who don't, and so I'm okay. But like, it's so therefore you can, it's all just subjective. So really, you've just got to trust yourself, man. You've got to just trust yourself to find a sound that moves you, man. And it has to be honest. It has to be sincere. And there can't be an ounce of thinking, this does feel good, but it only really feels good because I know those people are going to really dig on it. You know, I like, and as I said, you can kind of, you can hear it. You can hear when it's not, when that's not the case. But like how you access that, you know, I mean, I still, to this day, I sit down and I'll write something and I'll be like, I'm not feeling that, you know. And that can still happen. And you know, I'm fascinated by this idea of writer's block. You know, you get these hugely successful artists, and then they, you know, put out these, you know, huge albums, and then you don't hear anything from them for years. You know, and they just disappear. And it's like, did they stop writing? Like, sure, of course they didn't stop writing. That's what they do. And I you know, you hear time and time again, they get writer's block, and they just, every idea they're coming up with, they're not feeling. And you know, I think there's a lot also to be said for, I like to think of art as like you're a farmer, you know, and you're sowing crops, you know, and you've got to give the crops time to harvest, you know, and you're not going to be harvesting all the time. Like, you've got to have the experience to have the idea, to let the idea germinate, to let the idea be realized, and then record the idea. And you know, these ideas are as a result of life experience. You know, I often say that you've got to write, you've not, you know, sure, get in the practice room and study and transcribe and listen to loads of stuff and be inspired. Actually, that's another big one. It's like, you've got to, like, when I made Flint, I was so inspired by a record by Herbie Hancock called Sunlight, that was just this like bang, like, my head just exploded when I heard it. I was like, oh my god, like, I've never heard anything like this, and I've got to find my own version of it. Like, it was like I was possessed. I was just so inspired. I was like, physically, like, I have to do this. And that's the feeling we've got to keep searching for, to be bothered, to, you know, to be asked to go and do it, you know. You've got to have that inspiration. But I can't remember what my last point was. It's just, you know, you've got to stay inspired. It will come back to me. But yeah, I mean, yeah, does that help? Does that answer your question? Or was that?
Yeah, that was a good answer. I think everybody really appreciated that. Thanks, man.
Cool, man. Yeah, that point will come back to me. Damn, it's gone.
I'm going to hop in and see if there are some more questions. If you've got a question for Bill and you haven't put it into the chat yet, then please feel free. We've got a few more minutes. It'd be nice to get through a few. I'm going to go to Victor, actually. Victor, would you like to ask Bill your questions? Because I know that you sent a question to me.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
How you doing? Nice to meet you.
You too, man.
My question is about your process of composing, how you approach that, your ideas, how you organize them. Is there voice notes on your cell phone or something in Logic, Pro Tools, something like that?
Yeah, yeah, great, man. I mean, yeah, with that stuff, I I try again, like sort of reinforcing what we were talking about earlier. The reoccurring theme is openness and free flow, because I try not to stick to one method, I suppose, and that tends to kind of yield the most options in terms of documenting ideas. So, I mean, one thing I often do is I'll be walking along and I use my the pace of my walk as a kind of as a metronome, as a pulse, and I will like either beatbox or whistle or sing or hum into my phone, and there'll just be little seeds of melodies or ideas or grooves or rhythms or bass lines or anything. Just and I've got I mean God, I've got hundreds of them in here, like and you know, and very rarely do they actually turn into anything, but occasionally they do, and it's just this seed, and then I plant it into Logic. So I use Logic. I find that to be the most kind of intuitive for getting ideas down quickly, and it's really good with MIDI and stuff. So I often, and I also find Logic really useful for creating a concept. Like you can obviously use it to write your melody and your chord progression and your bass line and your rhythm, but it's also you can also work as a producer within Logic quite easily, and start creating a world. You know, like I'll play. Actually, I could quickly play an excerpt from. Can you hear that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is. This is a demo. In fact, I might share my screen. Is that easier?
I think you have permission to do that. I think. Oh no, hang on. There you go.
Yeah. So this is. This is a demo of Neverending City that I made in Logic, and so everything. Let's the end there. So this is all MIDI basically within Logic. And so I created that whole world kind of within Logic, and then I recorded it with real musicians. And so I was kind of establishing the world in Logic, and then when you hand it to real musicians, they can bring it to life. Anyway, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but you know, so I basically use Logic. I'm going to stop the share because it feels like it's a different vibe. I use Logic to realize a concept, to realize a world. I try and create a world, and then you can, if you create a demo or an MP3, and I just send that to the band, and then they have a sense of the composition in terms of the theory of it, but they also have a sense of the intended kind of world and concept, and I think, you know, that's what I've found Logic to be really useful for in terms of establishing that stuff, you know. So, but then, yeah, and then also just writing at the piano, you know, just kind of being open to any different way of writing. I also write at the guitar because I'm not a very good guitarist, so because my technique is sort of not as good on the guitar, I end up going for different chords or different directions, and that can also be a cool thing. Or like I literally write on a conga. I wrote Ready Wednesday on a conga because it was just the rhythm of that on a conga. But then also the final point I'd say about like the composition process is the significance of melody. I think I've sort of come to learn that more recently, and I try and actually now put melody everywhere. That's something Snarky do really well all the time. Michael League is, there's like a melody in the bass line, there's a melody in the chord progression, there's a melody in the drum beat, and there's a melody in the melody, you know, and so you're just like being bombarded with melody. And there's so many kind of hooks to just like, there's a hook, there's a hook, there's a hook, and but they all sort of obviously sort of combine beautifully, and that is kind of the trick, is how you kind of make them all together. But I can't emphasize enough how important melody is, and how melody should really kind of drive everything, I think. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Sort of.
Thanks, man.
You got it, man. You got it.
Nice. I'm going to read some of these out for the sake of time. I'll try to see if we can cram a few in before we finish.
Sure.
So Carol says, what do you wish you had learned from your first piano or music teacher?
Wish I had learned.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's a tough one, man. I feel like what I wanted to say is not to be so hard on myself, actually. But I feel like actually in being hard on myself, that's what's driven me, you know? Like, it was me pulling my hair out of my head that made me go, I have to do this, and it has to be of a standard if I do nothing else, you know. But it was so fraught with like pain, and like, you know, like it's hard, man. It's hard. And now I kind of look back and I go, did it really have to be that hard and that kind of painful? And like, you know, like, because it's just music, man. Like, music is just, you know, and like the whole thing about getting nervous for a gig, like a lot of the guys in Snarky will often say, like, you know, it's just music, man. Like, why are you getting nervous? It's just music. Like, you know, you might get nervous if you're about to go in a courtroom or something, you know, or I don't know, just, you know, or racing in a really fast car. But we're just playing music, man. You know, just chill. Like, it's just a good time. Music's here to make things better. Like, let's just, what's all the grief for? What's all the, you know, what's all this negative energy for? Like, God, you know, and we as musicians, we get ourselves in such a pickle, and it's like, what are we on about? You know, we really lose perspective, and I think it's because we're so well versed at thinking about our ideas, and we can, you know, you can get really sort of self involved, and I think you know, the goal is to just reverse that, get out of that headspace, you know, lose the ego.
Nice.
All that stuff.
Bill, are you good if we go slightly over to answer these last few questions? Is that cool with you?
Sure.
Nice one, man. Thank you. So I'm going to read Andy's question. He says, I've got a question that I feel would be beneficial for all of us here. He says, being in lockdown and being a fresh music school graduate, I'm trying to keep active by placing goals for me as a musician. So one of my goals is to start working on my first record. It seems rather scary because besides writing music, I don't really know how one would go about doing that. Any advice on how to make your first record?
I think you have to set deadlines. I mean, it's tricky now because of the situation we're in, but I think the trick with like getting out the blocks is that is you know, it's so hard to let go of that first record and say it's finished, and like, so either trying to find someone like a sort of outside, a friend, a musician you trust and you respect, who can help you, who can help be the kind of the mirror and say, okay, it's finished. But in terms, before you get to that point, just setting deadlines and saying, okay, I'm going to, in, you know, like, and give yourself time, like in 3 months I'm going to record my record, and I've got 3 months. I mean, maybe that's a long time. Depends how fast you write. That's what I did with Swift, the second record. I was just like, I'm Flint is out, and now I'm going to go for Swift, and I just gave myself a deadline, and then I booked the musicians and the studio in like 3 months ahead of time, and I'd only written about 20-30% of the record, and I had to write 70% of the album in like 2.5 months. But because it was all booked in and I booked the musicians in the studio, I was like, well, it's happening, you know. And just kind of putting that pressure on yourself, I think can be useful, as long as it's not too much pressure. And then find, you know, if you struggle to actually get to a point of finishing it, then bringing someone else in, you know, I think you have to, there comes a point where you have to relinquish control. I mean, that's why producers, there is a whole industry of producers, and that's their job, is to come in and, you know, find a producer to help you just realize that first thing. If it's, because I realized the reason it took me so long was because I needed a producer. I needed somebody to help me push it over the finish line, and I needed to relinquish control, and that was tough because I'm, you know, I wanted to be the master of my first record. I knew what it needed to sound like, but, you know, I needed somebody else to help. Yeah.
Nice one. Okay, Sam's got a question. Sam, do you want to answer this question yourself?
Yeah, if that's fine.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so yeah, my question was if you ever feel unmotivated, and how do you deal with that? Because like during lockdown I get productive for like maybe 10 days in a row, and then I have 2 days of feeling like shit and getting nothing done, you know. I think we all can relate.
Oh, absolutely.
Can anyone else relate on this call? I mean, I can relate to that. All right, show of hands. Cool.
We can all relate. Oh my God, that's so tough, man. And I know exactly how you're feeling. Well, I can relate. I can relate for sure. And it's like we were talking before, you know, I think there is a significant part where we have to just, that's, you know, it needs to be a roller coaster. Like, that's what makes life interesting. And almost every time you get those, the troughs, you know, maybe trying to utilize them as a way of documenting something that might turn into a creative expression later. But I think it's going back to that thing of inspiration. You've got, like, I've felt the exact same thing, and I realize why. It's because all the music I've been listening to and up to that point recently had not been inspiring me, and I just felt like I was and so what we, in a way, our role, our job is to search. We have to be musicologists. We have to be, you know, we have to research music, and we have to keep searching for music until it really gives us that buzz. Because it's the buzz, you know, the times that you did feel good, the times that you did feel like, oh yeah, I'm into this. Why? Because you're inspired, because you've heard something that you really genuinely liked and you genuinely thought was fresh. So we've just got to keep finding that music. We've got to keep just searching for it. you know, and you might search for a while and still feel like there's nothing really hitting me, you know. But then maybe change tack, maybe you know, if that's the case, shift direction, you know, go search into music that you haven't searched into at all before. Um, you know, like I guess more world music I've been sort of exploring. I mean, I've always been fascinated by it, but um, we've spent some time in Istanbul with Snarky Puppy, and there's a group of drummers that play these drums called DAF drums. They're big round frame drums with loads of little springs hanging. They're like ancient military drums, and when you shake them, they go and they play them in unison, like in groups of. I mean, they used to play them in the army, you know, like they were just like hundreds of these things, just like, and it was like, and when you hear it, it just like, oh, it was just like, oh my God, I'm like, what is that sound, you know? And I don't remember the last time I heard a sound that had that kind of impact on me, you know. And then it's okay, so let's grab that sound and channel it, like, you know, put it somewhere, like, you know. And again, that seed of inspiration is just like, boom, and just kind of re-realizing it, you know. But I hear you, man, and it's also about embracing the trough. You've just got to sort of feel okay that that's part of the process, because nobody can stay up all the time. It's not human, you know. We have to go up and down. It's what happens, and it's natural. It keeps things balanced, actually, you know. So and by going down, it allows you to get a perspective to go up, and vice versa. You've got to have both.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much.
Yeah, there's three more questions. Chaz, you've asked a question. You said to me that I mentioned. You said, Nick, you mentioned people have a blind spot. Can I ask about that? If it's okay with you, I'll speak to that in the Just Play community, because I want to sort of capitalize. But I will answer your question, and we can have a chat about it if you want to as well. Giselle says, I was having real trouble with the drum MIDI because I'm not an expert.
Drum MIDI.
Oh, was that I think it was relating to the, was that in relation to your previous question, Giselle?
No, it wasn't. But yeah, I think it was something about when Bill was showing us his recording with the drums, but that's not really related, so it's okay.
Okay, no problem. Gerald Peter's got a question. This is the last one.
Yes. Hello. Hi, Bill. Hi, everyone.
How's it going?
How are you doing? Yeah, I once brought you a Rolling keyboard at home, and you remember?
Absolutely right, man. My man.
Yeah.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks. Yeah, thank you so much for this talk. It's very interesting, and thanks also for all the inspiration you brought to the world of your music. And yeah, you inspired me a lot, actually, as an artist. And I have the question, because I'm also a musician with my own projects, and right now I'm at the point where I got an album ready with my solo project, actually, and I think about the future, and I think about how do we get actually one step up in a like musician's career from playing, you know. I'm used to play with my own projects, like in small clubs and in like small audiences for friends and family, but I want to go one step up, so can maybe, you know, play at festivals and stuff. And usually it's to get started with this one higher level, it feels like there's so many barriers there, to overcome before you even get recognized to go this one level up, or then I start like feeling frustrated, or I doubt myself. Is it not good enough, or is the music? Is it you know? Is it not? Is it too? Do I mix too many styles, or because I love to mix different genres as well, which is maybe sometimes difficult, you know, for some people to appreciate, because they don't know what it is. Is it jazz, or is it more prog rock, or is it somewhere in between, you know? So yeah, so I just want to ask, how have you ever had the feeling that you doubt yourself, or you had the feeling that you don't know how to make progress in your career? And
Yeah.
yeah.
That feeling never really goes away.
Okay.
Man, I totally hear you, and I would say
Yeah.
that you know, I mean, it all sounds so familiar to me.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, the thing that I first thought of, I wanted to share was, you know, adapting. So like, you know, I remember just thinking I was trying to push my solo thing, uh,
Yeah.
and this was before I met Snarky, or you know, before the whole Snarky thing happened.
Okay. Okay.
And then obviously Snarky grew, and it was also kind of working with those musicians that opened doors, or like that taught
Yeah.
me, you know, taught me about finding my own sound. But I think, you know,
Yeah.
the one thing I might say is like, is adapting in terms of trying different directions, not just within your solo career, but within your career. So
Yeah.
like collaborations, you know, like, because for me, in the end, what sort of what gave me a stepping stone was the fact that I was playing in Snarky Puppy. Really, you know, that's kind of where
Right. Right.
it began for me. And I think a lot of, unless, you know, I feel like the majority of artists, I mean, like, you know, Herbie and all the guys in that band, like Herbie and Wayne and you know, well, particularly those two in Miles's band, you know, they were just playing in Miles's band. They, you know, and people didn't really
Yeah.
know them until, and then they got a gig with Miles, and then they were like on the scene, you know, and then people wanted to know. So like, I think often we can, because I had that same thing. It's like I have to go solo because I want to put my solo stuff out, and that's the trajectory I'm going. And it will
Right.
often just kind of feel like, you know, hitting a brick wall with, when it's just on one level, right?
Exactly.
So,
That's how it feels. Yeah. Sometimes.
I hate it. I felt just the same. I mean,
Yeah.
I often still do. But you know, but so then just change direction. Like, you know, if you always go in one direction,
Yeah.
and you feel like you're not getting the return, then try an alternative direction,
Right.
where you're collaborating, and you know, and bring other artists, you know, into the field. And you know, I mean, the next record I want to do, is going to be, I want to do a vocal album featuring loads of different singers, because
Cool.
I've never sort of done that collaboration before. And I think, you know, I think that will open up other doors, I think. And yeah, like, and that point about categorizing yourself or whatever, again, I think it just comes back down to the audience will believe and engage and enjoy whatever it is you're doing, as long as what you're doing it has a sincerity about it, and a truth and an honesty. And
Yeah.
whatever genre or not or any of that stuff is
Right.
should be an afterthought, really, you know.
Right. I mean, that's how I feel. I don't think in genres. I just think in music and different, you know, emotions you want to get across. However sound you want to do. But I feel the world we live in, they just try to put names on everything, what you're doing. And sometimes that's not possible with one name, right?
Totally, man, totally.
Yeah.
And that's our job as well, is to kind of, you know, is to question those norms, you know, and to
Right.
challenge them,
Yeah.
to create our own genre, you know, to create.
So maybe I should do my own festival then without genres.
Right.
Do it.
You I didn't need to say anything. That's it.
Yeah, right. Would you like to perform that? No, I'm
Nice.
kidding.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, dude. Nice one.
Nice one. So we'll draw things. Nice one, Gerald. Nice one, Gerald. So we'll draw things to a close here. If Bill, if anyone wants to join you on Patreon, they can do that, can't they? Because you do this kind of hang with your crowd.
Totally. In fact, there's a couple of guys here on Alex and Chaz, always representing. Yeah, but so Patreon, it's like it's a really cool thing actually, and it's the community. It feels like now. I mean, it feels a similar vibe to this, and we do there's different tiers, but there's like a monthly Q&A where we kind of have this kind of chat, and we've started making a ritual that we have a live jam on Zoom as well, which is
Cool.
the latency is kind of tricky, but it's cool.
Nice.
But it's just really nice. We're all just playing live in different corners of the world at the same time. It's quite cool. And you know, we're just digging on that. But yeah, that's really the best place to sort of connect, I guess. If there is one, that's the one.
Ace. Okay. And I'd also say if anyone's interested in catching any of the other kind of calls, either the ones we've got coming up with other artists or the ones we've done previously, then some of those are in the Just Play community on Facebook. So if you're not, I know there may be a few people who are not a member of that yet. So if you're not, then just hop over to Facebook and you know, come and join us in there. There's all sorts of stuff along a similar theme to what we've been talking about tonight. Bill, it's been wonderful, a pleasure as ever. I love hanging, and it's great with these wonderful people listening in on the conversation. I could talk all evening, but alas, it's come to an end. So thanks again, and huge thanks to everyone on the call. We'll speak soon.
Amazing. Nick, thank you for having me, man. It's always, you know, it's just so nice.
Thank you, Bill and Nick. Super appreciate it.
Man, bless you guys. It's just so nice to be able to have a chat like this out of the context of a kind of institution, you know, where we have to kind of tick the boxes of, you know, we've got to talk about theory, let's just talk about life, let's talk about music, let's talk about, you know, just kind of bring it down to earth for a minute. And you're an expert at doing that. So yeah, it's always a pleasure, man. Thanks for having us.
Lovely. Pleasure's all mine. Awesome. Speak soon. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Fun.
Thank you very much for talking.
Thank you, man.
See you, everyone.
Keep playing, guys. Don't stop being the glue. You know what I'm saying? All right.
See you later. Bye.
Guys, take care. Ciao.
Bye.